give theirs. As the world was trying to pull itself out of the coronavirus pandemic, and while Russia and Ukraine were engaging in a war that holds enormous ramifications for global peace, on 14 to 15 September 2022, dozens of religious leaders gathered in Kazakhstan for the 7th Congress of the Leaders of World and Traditional Religions. The theme of the gathering appropriately focused on the role of leaders of world and traditional religions in the spiritual and social development of mankind in the post-pandemic world. In his welcome speech, President Tokayev set the agenda for discussions and reflections by remarking that as we face an increasingly turbulent geopolitical post-pandemic world, it becomes more crucial to develop new approaches to strengthening inter-civilizational dialogue and trust at the global level. The declaration released at the conclusion of the two-day event affirms the essential role of religions in helping to address contemporary global dilemmas. One of the major concerns which the leaders paid attention to was caring for our common home, which in his speech in the first plenary session, Pope Francis mentioned as one of 4 important tasks that needed to be carried out post-pandemic. The others were becoming artisans of communion, addressing the challenge of peace, and promoting fraternal acceptance. This multi-pronged agenda is reflected in the final declaration, which states, "We appeal to all people of faith and goodwill to unite in this difficult time and contribute to ensuring security and harmony in our common home, planet Earth." Indeed, human and environmental flourishing comprises multiple intertwining facets: social, political, economic, environmental, and spiritual, all serving to impact each other either negatively or positively. Thus, the participants declared that in the conditions of post-pandemic world development and the globalization of processes and security threats, the Congress of the Leaders of World and Traditional Religions plays an important role in the implementation of joint efforts to strengthen dialogue in the name of peace and cooperation, as well as the promotion of spiritual and moral values. The Asian Research Center for Religion and Social Communication shares the sentiments stated above and has allocated most of the pages of our latest issue of Religion and Social Communication to the theme of religion and environmental flourishing, reflections from the pandemic experience. The contributions in the form of research articles and essays come from a variety of religious perspectives: Buddhist, Catholic, Muslim, Jain, Hindu, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox. In today's program, some of these perspectives will be presented. Despite coming from different religious worldviews, the underlying message fundamentally affirms that promoting ecological flourishing requires an approach that centers on both praxis and spirituality in order to prevent the task of caring for our common home to become simply a series of dry mechanical calculations, purely theoretical propositions, or clever policy enactments. Religions at their best inspire and infuse external acts that are consistent with authentic interior virtues, ordered to the well-being of both humanity and the natural environment. In this respect, religions must undergo its own self-examination in order to adequately speak to the present context. Although there have been countless books, academic articles, and conferences on the topic of religion and the environment, there is still a need for ongoing voices for multiple reasons. First, as long as the ecological crisis continues to threaten human and environmental flourishing, there can never be silence even if what is now said has already been said before. The environmental crisis did not develop overnight, and it would not be resolved in a short time. Persistence on the part of those who recognize the problem and tirelessly address it is essential to its mitigation and hopefully eventual remedy. In addition, old voices can be renewed, reinvigorated, and represented in new social contexts where both the speaker and the listener approach the issue with different understanding and sensibilities. Thus, even if the content of the message isn't new, how and in what circumstances it is presented may help it to gain new import. As religion and the environment can impact each other, at the same time be impacted by technological and social developments, ongoing engagement in the discourse in an interdisciplinary and interreligious manner promises to be beneficial to the ultimate goal of achieving flourishing and well-being for both nature and humanity. What religions continually emphasize is that the dilemmas plaguing humanity today are not just social issues. As Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyab, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, remarked in his speech at the Congress in Kazakhstan, the issues of concern to global religious leaders is the topic of the hour at the spiritual and social levels. Therefore, when it comes to such complex dilemmas as the environmental crisis, changes must start from within the human spirit. Otherwise, remedies are only superficial, temporary, and inadequate. The COVID-19 pandemic experience has revealed this lack of and need for deeper spiritual transformation from humanity. During the first year of the pandemic, in which the virus was wreaking havoc on nations and peoples, causing lockdowns on a massive scale, there was hope that the pandemic would somehow serve as a reset for the environment. Skies were clearer, more wild animals appeared in public places, and certain natural places bereft of human footprints revitalized. But all this was not much more than a temporary respite, because environmentally positive actions were carried out due to force, not from an awakening of conscience. In fact, there were many signs that humans were just as willing to disregard the well-being of nature to protect their own health, at least in the short term. All plans for reusable cups at cafes and restaurants were put on hold. Discarded masks and COVID-19 test kits became one of the most common forms of garbage. As people did not leave the house, most opted for ordering things online that were delivered in layers of wrappings that would be discarded as trash. When restaurants were reopened, utensils came individually wrapped in plastic to ensure proper sanitation. And once travel restrictions were removed, demand for airline tickets surged to pre-pandemic levels. Since 2021, the term revenge travel has become a buzzword to describe the pent-up demand for travel to make up for lost trips during pandemic restrictions. Thus, even when petrol prices doubled and airline ticket prices skyrocketed due to higher demands, people still organized big trips by air and by land with little hesitance. Thus, going forward, I propose that religion, in dialogue with one another and with its own adherents, try to promote environmental flourishing in an enduring manner by promoting an extremely essential condition for environmental flourishing, that human beings become truly human. Due to the tyrannical and selfish ways that human beings have displayed in their action towards nature and each other, being human is oftentimes interpreted as being imperfect and prone to mistakes. While human beings do make mistakes, the major religious traditions aim to help human beings become what they were meant to be, truly human, that is, achieve authentic and fully realized personhood. Environmental flourishing is only possible when human beings, with the help of religion, conscientiously strive for this existential reality. The movement towards authentic personhood finds its inspiration in religious anthropologies that consistently affirm the value and integrity of human person and emphasize the need to assist the individual in the process of achieving full personhood, which entails the elimination of various spiritually harmful elements from human lives. The Theravada tradition of Buddhism, for example, teaches that transmigrating from the lower non-human realms, such as the animal or hungry ghost, to the human realm is an exceptionally rare event that requires the accumulation of a great amount of merit in past lives. This is an enormous challenge because those confined to the lower realms lack the opportunities to be taught and grasp the Dhamma, to practice right and wholesome actions, and to perform merit, things that are essential to a more favorable rebirth. On the other hand, even if one exists in one of the heavenly realms, rebirth as a human is a prerequisite for entering Nibbana, the Buddhist state of complete emancipation from suffering. The Abrahamic religions likewise give high status to human beings by depicting them as created in the image of God, endowed with qualities possessed by their creator, free will, wisdom, consciousness, and so on. Although the level of these human qualities is extremely limited compared to God, they nevertheless are attributes that are unique to human beings that animals and other biotic creatures do not possess. Unfortunately, humans have oftentimes interpreted this religiously bestowed high status to mean that they have the mandate to control and exploit nature as their hearts desired. Much social and environmental degradation has been caused by this delusional sense of superiority and privilege. However, in extolling the position of the human person, this self-understanding and subsequent display of hubris and tyranny was by no means the intention of religious traditions being considered. In fact, an informed understanding of their teachings would reveal that such attitudes and actions represent a misinterpretation of these very teachings. Rather, these religions have always affirmed the value of the human person in order to help people recognize the dissonance between how they ought to be and how they actually are. Historically, religious teachers consistently try to point out that the reality of people's lives was not in accord with their true potential, that they were far off the mark in terms of authentic personhood. Confucius pointed out that social disharmony and conflict in the family and society resulted from the lack of self-cultivation in the virtues that constituted fully realized humanity. Confucian teachings present essential virtues such as Ren, meaning benevolence or humaneness, or Li, meaning ritual or propriety, and others as indispensable qualities of agency. Translated variously as exemplary person or profound person, Jingsu is a well-cultivated individual that embodies both the internal and external virtues in a unity of knowledge and action. One of the greatest abilities of a Jingsu is engaging in continuous critical self-examination, which allows for the penetration of the inner self to realize the true nature of human relatedness. The Buddha similarly attributed personal and social suffering to the unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion plaguing humanity. These poisons can only be overcome through the process of rigorous self-cultivation that involves the training to gain higher virtues, concentration, and wisdom, elements that characterize authentic humanhood. Becoming a human in the Buddhist vision then is casting off ways of thinking speaking, and behaving that devalue human life and cause pain and suffering to self and other sentient beings. What the various religious traditions discussed here demonstrate is that becoming human, in other words, achieving authentic personhood, has both personal and relational dimensions. While self-cultivation always aims for personal liberation from pain and suffering in this and or the afterlife, it also has a relational dimension. Authentic humanity, in the Confucian understanding, is never egotistical, narcissistic, or anthropocentric. A well-cultivated person does not focus singularly on his or her own happiness, but clearly see himself or herself as a center of ever-expanding concentric circles of relationships, beginning with self and progressively reaching out to family, community, earth, and heaven. According to Tu Wei Ming, if nepotism is detrimental to the harmony in the family and chauvinistic nationalism is contrary to patriotism, then anthropocentrism is also detrimental to achieving ecological flourishing. The vision of harmony at the local and cosmic levels demands that human beings see themselves as being both socialistic and naturalistic, that human beings cannot be just anthropological or anthropocentric, but anthropocosmic, that is, seeing themselves beyond merely socialistic or materialistic qualities. Therefore, becoming human, truly human, means transcending egotistical and solipsistic tendencies to allow for greater enriching relationship with fellow human beings and other natural entities. In some traditions, the relationship also extends to transcendent beings. Thus, paradigmatic personhood, as envisioned by major religious traditions, is a person being totally open to relationship with those things that make up the existential reality. Becoming human is essential to environmental flourishing because it helps eliminate anthropocentric tendencies that lead to wanton exploitation of natural resources, disregard for well-being of individual species, and even disregard for one's own human community. The theologian Karl Barth wrote over half a century ago, "There are many matters in which the church could well be more modern than she is, but the time is beginning already in which having the courage to be old and human is going to be the most modern thing at all." As the world accelerates further into the digital age, bringing with it old unsolved problems and creating new dilemmas, inspiring hope and enthusiasm as well as uncertainty, fear and trepidation towards the future, perhaps the most radical and essential thing that we can all do is to take a moment and reflect on what it means to be truly human. While many people are setting their eyes on the prospect of becoming superhuman or transhuman, what the wisdom of our age-old spiritual and religious traditions have emphasized has always been the need to cultivate authentic personhood. It is through this seemingly very familiar yet elusive state that we can best situate and understand ourselves going forward in this post-pandemic time, and how best to enter into relationship with our neighbor, the rest of creation, and with the divine.